Hey everyone, after this video is completed, I don't want to hear anybody complain about my opinion on Thundercats again, because we're going to rebuild this Thunder Tank from the ground up. So if I hated it that badly, I wouldn't be doing this. So let's get started.
And keep your foot off that blasted flange.
So when we acquired the Thundercats lair, we acquired a Thunder Tank with it. And when I started looking at it, it wasn't in the best cosmetic shape. It needed a cleanup, but its parts weren't broken until I tried to set it in the rest position. Now, if you look at this Thunder Tank, you will see that this is my childhood Thunder Tank, my brother's childhood Thunder Tank. And like the television show, when it sits at rest, it kind of hunkers down. Everything's very streamlined, and the front end is low to the ground. When I activate the Thunder Tank, the paws come up. This other Thunder Tank, when I was assessing its condition, when I would press the seat down in order to bring everything back down to the ground, the only way to get it to lock forced these arms to come up. So it looked like the Thunder Tank was riding sort of arms high, and this particular one, and that isn't correct. I couldn't figure out how to correct the problem. So I thought, well, much like sometimes mystery problems in cars are solved by rebuilding the entire engine, I took this Thunder Tank down to its base parts, and I decided I'm going to start over and rebuild it using this one as the reference. So what we're going to do is we're going to start from the ground up with this chassis right here, and we're going to rebuild this Thunder Tank using this one as a model since it works properly. So this is what we want it to do when it's, in battle mode, and then when we press it down, we want those legs to go all the way back to the ground so it's streamlined. That's our goal. So let's get started rebuilding this Thunder Tank. So the first step, of course, was to wash all the parts, and I did a light wash on all the parts just to get some of the nastier gunk and sticky stuff off that happens with these childhood toys, because you never know where they get stored before they end up, in your possession. I'm sure a lot of you know that pain. And the last part I took off will be the first part I put back on, which is, the top dashboard of the Thunder Tank. It sits right here on the top, It's fairly straightforward. It has these two sort of guide pins that sit in these trenches right here. So you fit that in like that. It fits pretty snugly, and then you flip it over where the mouth is eventually going to go. This mouthpiece right here, and you want to put in 4 screws. Now here's the deal. These 2 screws at the top, right behind the top teeth, they were the only screws I found that had this feature on the Thunder Tank, which was tiny gold washers. These tiny brass washers, which it's going to be hard to see, but trust me, you don't want to lose those washers. You want them to go right back into the Thunder Tank. All right, so these go in the top 2 holes. There are no other brass washers that I found. So we're going to screw these in first. And you're using the longer screws that come with the Thunder Tank. You'll find that the Thunder Tank predominantly has long screws and short screws with a few specialty screws that I'll show you when we get to that point. So we're going to put these 2 with the brass washers in at the top. And obviously, for anybody who's like, well, why didn't you film the disassembly? It was because I didn't realize I was going to be disassembling it, and I got caught up in the work beforehand. So if you want to know how to disassemble it, what you should do is you should go to the beginning of this video and then rewind, or the end of this video and rewind the whole thing, and you'll see how to disassemble the Thunder Tank. So go to the end of the video and play it in reverse. All right, so now we have 2 other long screws that are going to go in 2 holes. They're hard to see. 1, 2. So they're going to be right here, and you want a screwdriver that doesn't have like a switchable head on it, because it's going to make it thicker. You want a dedicated screwdriver to do this job. So when I was taking apart this tank, I was shocked at how intricately built it was. It wasn't the most complex toy that I've disassembled, but it was certainly one of the ones with the most parts, the most engineering. Thankfully it didn't have a lot of intricate, wedge assemblies, or it wasn't like the Y-wing. It wasn't like some of the other toys we've done that you wonder if you're ever going to get it back together. But it did have a solid build quality, which is something that I was shocked by, especially given that it's from LJN. All right, so we have these 4 screws to put the face back on. All right, remember, you don't want to ever over tighten. Once you feel resistance on a plastic toy from the 80s, you just want to stop. You just want to make sure it's snug. All right, so we now have the face back on the Thundertank, and now we need to determine what we're going to put in next. I think, if memory serves me correctly, we have to put in the seat assembly, which is this guy right here. So if we use this one as a reference, this is going to go this way with the gun facing toward the nose. And these pieces, these arms, face forward. And then this sort of other piece also swings forward. So everything on the seat, these arms and this piece, they all face the nose of the Thundertank. So keep that in mind. Now you have guide pins on either side of these, on either arm. You have guide pins here and here. These pairs of guide pins align with these slots on the side of the tank. Okay, so on either side you have these slots, and these pins are going to go right into those slots. Okay, this forward piece with this hook right here on the end, this piece is going to hook in to the spring that sits on the back of the lower jaw of the Thundertank. So this is going to be a little fiddly, so just bear with me. All right, so we're going to put all these arms in forward like this. And then we want those pins to line up with either side. Let's see. There we go. So now, even though this is a little loose, you can see that we have the pins aligned on this side and the pins aligned on this side. And this piece right here is going to move forward. You can see when I push this down, the seat wants to raise up, and when I pull it forward, the seat kind of wants to go down. And that's part of the motion of this action feature. Now what we're hoping is that when I rebuild it to match this one, that it will sit properly. All right, so now that we have that in place, what I want to do, see how this seat is coming down right at the back? Comes down right at the back. I want to see what this one looks like when I do the same thing. Yes, it's coming down right at, I know it's hard to see, but it's coming down right at the back. So I'm just test fitting to make sure that what I'm doing is correct before I start buttoning things up. All right, so now if we flip this over, we have our arm right here, and it's ready to receive this spring. So here's the spring, there's the arm. We have to flip this over and then get that spring hooked around the end of this arm. There's like a plastic hook that I showed you earlier. Alright, so we're going to grab this spring here. Alright, so the lower jaw sits in this kind of slot. There's two gaps. sits in this slot right here. And then you want that spring to come up and stretch through. Like I said, this is, so let's hook it. Here's the best practice. So what you want to do, hook it to that first. Hook it to that arm first. Sorry, the spring came off the piece. All right, so we're going to hook it to this first and then lay everything down. Well, this was easier the last time. All right, third time's a charm. There we go. All right, so now we have it hooked in. We can set it like this. So now it's where it's supposed to be. Okay. Now, how does it stay there? Well, it stays there with this bottom plate. This plate goes in like this. If it would behave. Okay, so first we want to press There we go. All right, so now that this is seated, it has these brackets that it sits in right at the end of this arm, and then it has an area for the jaw. Oh, see, it's trying to pop out. There, we want that firmly in place. This should fit down. Right. Okay, so now this is fitted down, and we're going to use, I want to say, long screws on this. It's hard to remember, so we're going to go with the longer screws to get this to sit properly, or fasten properly, or whatever you want to call it. If it doesn't work, we'll try the shorter screws. Nope, that looks like that was correct. Okay, that's 1 and 2. What I'm trying to determine now is how to get these last pins in here. All right, you see there's a third hole? Well, on the end of these arms, there's another part of the post that needs to go in there. And clearly, those have fallen out of alignment since I've attempted to get the jaw in. So I'm going to try and fix this real quick, but it looks like I'm going to have to back up on some of my work. I'm going to have to reverse some of what I've done. So I'll be right back, and then I'll show you what I did. All right, I found my mistake. When I put this on, I didn't ensure that these pins were pressed in to the side of the Thunder Tank before I did. These need to be in place before this piece with these sort of like guide fins come down on either side. These prevent these pins from popping back out. So you want to make sure that those are in place before you put this on there. Now that that's on there, that's a much better fit. I can feel it right now. And I'm going to put these screws back in as quickly as possible. Sometimes when you're, dealing with a toy you've never worked with before, it can be trial and error. Okay. All right, so now if we look at this, I think we're in good shape and we're on our way. Okay. All right. Now what we need to do is work on filling out these side areas with the proper components. All right, so now we're going to focus on the sides of the Thunder Tank and get the mechanisms for the arms and wheels to come back up. When you do that action feature, there are wheels underneath his jaw right here. They're these kind of wheels. They're like the front wheels so that the tank can keep rolling when it's in action mode. And then you have the mechanism that allows the whole tank to rear up. We're going to rebuild that on this side and the other side of the tank. So the first thing you want to do is you want to grab a wheel assembly. Of course, there are two of these. The one you want for the, I guess what you'd call the port side of the Thunder Tank if you were the driver, left if you were driving it, is you want the wheel to be mounted on the inside. So you want the wheel pinhole to be facing you, because there's also this sort of guide tab right here for the mechanism that sticks out. And then what you do is you sort of slot that into place with this end hole right here. Kind of goes like this, and then that slots up neatly underneath the jaw of the Thunder Tank. Now after that, you have this weird doodad right here. Now this guy is kind of the linchpin of the whole mechanism. And what you want to have happen is you want this post, it's kind of a little guide pin itself, you want that to slot here, and you want this central hole to go right here, and then you want this last piece to be doing this around the seat pin, so that when it comes up, everything moves in unison. So let me put that back down, put this like this. This goes like wrong way, so this goes like this, like that. And when this comes up, this all stays in place. All right, now there are 4 special screws. They are capped screws. They have these kind of, caps. I'll line them up here so you can see them. These 4 screws, you see those? Just kind of twist them around a little bit. Those 4 screws go on 2 on each side. So 2 here and then 2 on the other side. So let's get these screws in first so that this mechanism won't fall out anymore. So then we can attach the spring. Remember not to over tighten. Don't get overzealous. Not real wild about that particular screw, as it's got plastic refuse on it. Sometimes you want to clean the screws off if they've got a lot of flashing or plastic junk on them, because if you put them back in a different screw hole, they could actually warp the screw hole that you're putting them into, because it wasn't the same one they came out of, and I'd like to avoid that problem if I can. so that's out of there. Now we have a clean screw. All right. All right. So now we have that assembly in play. And now what we want to do is take this spring. There's two of these. And we want to put this sort of horizontal end around this hook here. All right, and then this round end around this post. And now we do the same thing to the other side. So I'm going to do the same thing to the other side, and then we will keep going with our reassembly of the Thundertank. All right, now that we have this assembly back together on both sides, you can see how the mechanism works. Now, the locking mechanism has not been reassembled yet, which is crucial, although it never worked very well. It's crucial to making this thing look like a tank again when you're not, you know, going all bear crazy on somebody. Roar. The first thing we want to do is we want to get this cover back on. Actually, I take that back. Let's not do the cover yet. Let's try and get the locking mechanism in place. Now, that mechanism really hinges on these two pieces, these two components. And they slot in through the back. So you see these holes here. They're going to thread in through the back. And then these pieces are going to stick out, and they're going to attach to the bumper assembly. Now, if I use my existing childhood Thundertank as a reference, what I can see here, I don't know if you can see that very well, but what I see is that these components, they slot in with this short hook end going toward the nose and inward. So you see how it kind of takes a turn inward right here midway. You want those to kind of be going in toward the chair on either side, and this slotted end going that way. Now I'm looking at this and I realize I've got it backwards. I need it to be this way because you want the longer end of the component. You want this piece right here higher than the shorter end, and you want this sort of bumper piece to be coming up. You don't want it going down. You want it going up. All right. So we'll start with this side. There is a slot right here at the back, like I said. This goes in, and then you kind of want to twist it a little bit to get it to, there you go. You bring it in at an angle. If that makes sense. Bring it in at an angle, and then there, it goes through. All right, now on the other side, there's a hole that this comes out of. You see it coming out right there. So you want it to come out this side of the hole. It'll stop because of this hook on the back. Because what's going to happen is when this all comes down, if I do the assembly correctly, when you push this down, it's going to hold it in place. You see how that pin holds the chair in place? That's what we want, and we want it on both sides. So let me undo the tension real quick. I'll put the other one in on the other side. Again, straight in, sort of at an angle. There it goes. You want it to thread right out the lower side here. There it is. Okay, so then when the chair comes down, these are going to keep the chair down. So now that we have the sides in place, we need to look at the back. So we have the locks slotted. We have 4 posts. Let's see it, I'll turn it this way. You have 4 posts. You have 2 short ones on the bottom and 2 large ones on the top. These are going to take long screws, and the short ones are going to take short screws. So on the back here we have 3 components for the rear bumper. We have this engine assembly, which is more like a cap cover. That's where the 4 screws are going to go. We have the actual lever mechanism, which activates the transformation feature of the Thundertank. and we have a spring. So the way I want to do this is I'm going to keep this thing on its wheels so you can kind of see how this is going to work. The spring is going to sit right here in this slot. And then you have this pin on the bottom of this assembly here. That's going to slot into the top of the spring. Now at that point, you're going to want this piece to compress. You want it to compress with these T-bars that are on these back these back pins, these locking pins. You want them outside the blue switch, the blue lever, like this. And this is where things get real fiddly, because while this is compressed, you've got to get this piece on. I don't know if you can see this, but it has these indentations in on either side of the back, and that's because it has to slip through the sort of shoulders of this engine piece, or this lever. All right, so let's see if we can make this happen. So this is going to be like this, and then this is going to go like that. You want this on the inside. Okay, we're not quite there. There we go. Okay. So now that that's pressed in, we want to make sure our lever's working. Okay, lever spring is working. Everything is seated. All right, so now we're going to put our screws in to secure this back piece, because we don't want it popping off. Long screws on the top, short screws on the bottom. Okay. Short screws go under here. Guess I'm going to have to prep that a little better. All right, let's just sit down. All right. I always try and put my screws in a like a star pattern, a diagonal pattern. It just helps equalize the pressure. I know it's not automotive repair, but you get into a force of habit after you've done automotive repair when it comes to putting in bolts or screws. And I find it does give me peace of mind when refastening vintage plastic parts. All right, this should be the last piece for this part of the vehicle. Okay. So now what we want to do is test our work. If everything has worked correctly, when I push this lever down, it will lock underneath here, and it will only unlock when I push this down, this lever on the back. Okay. So it's locked on this side. Hasn't quite locked on this. There we go. So now it's locked on this side, and it's locked on this side. All right. So that is that is working properly. All right. Now what we can do is we can put the side panels back on. Side panels are going to go like this one, like that. This slot is going to be for the rear tread. It's where a metal pin goes in, so we don't have to worry about putting that in before we put this back on. This piece has to go back on first. Now, if we look at these screw holes, we've got 4 screw holes. 1, 2, 3, 4. That looks like short, short, long, long. And let's see how many we have, because we know that we're going to need 2 long screws for each one of the legs of the Thunder Tank. So the 2 shoulders and the 2 rear treads. So that's 8. So that's 2, 4, 6, 8. So we have 8 screws there, which means what we're going to want to do is lean on our short screws. That's process of elimination. So this is going to take 4 short screws. Per side. Uh-oh. That popped out. We don't want that to happen. There we go. Alright, so I'm going to screw these in real quick. All right, and so now we're just going to repeat that on the other side. Everything's lined up. Everything is in the proper place. Put that on there. Don't want to strip the screw hole if I can help it, but sometimes the screw won't stop on its own. I mean, this is old plastic, so you just want to, you know, be sensitive to that. Like this one doesn't seem to want to tighten down, so I'm just going to let it sit at a snug position. All right, so we have these back on. Let's test our mechanism again. Mechanism looks good. Everything feels solid. Wheels don't want to go up in the activated position. That's good because we're going to need that. We're going to need that tension for this all to work. This one's a little looser than this one is, but it's probably just, you know, that's probably just the characteristics of an old toy. Okay. Now, I'm going to put the rear treads back on first. Now, these have a metal pin. Now, this metal pin is what is going in this slot right here that I was telling you about. This metal pin is what keeps the treads guided when the Thunder Tank pivots or, you know, activates its action transformation feature. Now, the way to get these back on is you have these blue haunches or attachment points. I call them haunches because it's the back end of the animal, so to speak. But these are going to go in through this hole and then attach. Now, one thing you're going to want is you're going to want these spacers to go in there. Now, these black spacers have 2 sides. So there's one side which is just a clean ring, and then there's another side to these spacers where you can see it has these kind of details, these kind of, I don't know if they're reinforcement molds or whatever, but these go toward the body, the chassis of the tank. So you want that part to face inward. So you're going to have that facing inward, and then you're going to have the shoulder mount go like this, and then you're going to put that, can't remember if it, yeah, it goes like that. Okay, because that's where your tread is going to sit, your rubber tread, when we put that back on. Okay, now using this as a model, you can see we want that yellow arrow to go up and to the right. So we're going to slot this into the groove. We're going to loop that over like this. I'm going to need a free hand to do that. Okay, so that moves properly. And then we're going to take our, and you can feel it when it's in the proper position, because it's slightly keyed. So you can feel when you're in the right position, because it will stay. See how it's kind of locked? So we know we're doing it the right way. The trick is keeping it in place while you get your screwdriver ready. Let's hope that worked. Okay. Feels correct. I hope. Again, I'm trying to make sure that this is properly installed with the right tension. But I don't want to strip the screw hole. Alright, I'm nervous about doing anything else with that at the moment, so I'm going to leave that as it is, and I'm going to do the other side. Same process, just in reverse. Slot your pin. Whoops. Okay, now that tightened down nicely. That one is a lot more taut than the one on the other side, which leads me to believe that I need to do something about that. That one, see how that one's not moving? This one's moving all over the place. That just took a little bit of extra encouragement to get that one to seat properly. Just had to, reseat the screws and give it a little more pressure. One of the things I realized I forgot to do was to put these doors back on. The rear flap and the two central back panels need to go back on. And unfortunately, I kind of messed myself up, because I think those need to go in with the assembly of the rear panel and the side panels. I think there's a way to get around this a little bit if I just loosen up one side of the back panel so that I can put the back panel back on, and then I'll try that with the side panels as well. So if that gives me a little bit of give, this goes in the slot right, so it'll go in the slot here, these pins, and then on this side. So it slots in like that. And then this one, we just back it up a little bit. I don't want to break these pins off. There we go. So that pops in like that. We can put the screw back in and not have to undo all of our work. Hopefully we can do the same thing with the side panels. This is quite a it's quite a cool toy given the way it was constructed. I'm not really wild about the engineering of it so much, but meaning in the sense of what they decided to make it do is not that interesting to me. It becomes more of a frustration than anything, but the construction of the toy was well thought out for its purpose. Okay, so this one matches up with that. You've got two tabs right here. So we're going to pull this out a little bit and slot that in like that. All right, so now that is in the right place. So I'll put that screw back on. Just remember to put the doors on before you put the side and back panel back on, and you'll be in even better shape. Although this isn't too terribly inconvenient to have to deal with. Pull this top screw out again. Here's our side panel, or top panel, depending on what you want to call it. We're going to pop this out just a little bit with our finger. We're going to get these tabs, or these hinges, lined up with it. That's one, and that's two. All right. We're in business, and nothing's broken. So it's starting to look like a Thunder Tank. So this is going to pop down. Pretty good. All right, now this is where we're getting to the point where the reason that I took this whole thing apart to begin with, which are the front arms. We have our two front arms, like this, and we have to get them into the assembly. I really hope I've done this right, because if I haven't, I'm going to have to undo all this. Okay. They have this kind of, I don't know what you'd call it, but it's this kind of extension right here. And that extension slots into the shoulder assembly like this. Obviously, when this thing is up, we want that to be up. So we have the side arm blasters, and we also have the shoulders themselves. Sidearm blasters slot like this. They sit in the assembly of the arm, and you want this sort of nondescript side facing inward. That's how you know each one's on the right, it's on the correct side. So this is going to be for the right arm of the Thunder Tank, and then the other one will be for the left. Now the way I want to put this together is have this up, and the trick is going to be, do I have it put in there properly so that it will activate the arm? see what happens when I pop this down so I can see. If this is in there like that when it's down, and we have our shoulder piece in there. Okay, the shoulder piece fits in. Yep, that's how it's going to flip up. It's not a lever that has to be slotted into any specific spot with the side panel off. It just needs to be in the proper orientation when we put it in. So I'm going to assemble this with the tank down and closed. Okay, so that seats in properly. That looks correct for how it's supposed to look when everything is on the ground. Now we're going to hope that these two screws go in the right way. I wonder if the factory misinstalled or improperly installed these arms and created the problem that I was having where when I pushed the seat down, the whole front end wanted to come up. Because it doesn't appear like that is an issue now. Alright, that's one. So we're going to test this. Look at that. That's working very nicely. Push it down. Arm goes down. This is looking very promising. I'm very happy with the result that we're getting so far. It's working better than my childhood one. Might have to take those arms off and figure out what's wrong with it. Although it has something to do with the locking mechanism, those locking pieces in the back. I have a feeling they might be worn down, or maybe they were never properly installed. All right, so we have our left arm. Is that the left arm? Yeah, our left arm. We have our left cannon. Goes in just like before. We're going to put that in there. Okay, it's at the proper position. And we're going to put our shoulder in there and twist it until it locks in. Okay. All right. Now you might be asking yourself at this point, well, this is just like every other Thunder tank that's on eBay. It doesn't have its rubber treads anymore because, as I've said many times in toy restorations, rubber is one of those things we're going to have to get comfortable with having reproductions of. Rubber dry rots, rubber breaks down, rubber isn't meant to last 40 years, especially not on a mass-produced toy for kids. But I have reproduced rubber treads that are made by a very enterprising person on eBay, and I'm going to add those right now. So these are the rubber treads. You might have seen them in the video that I did a while back when I repaired the treads on my childhood Thunder tank. These are those same treads. Now the reason I took them off my childhood Thunder tank was because I had one good tread left, and right after I did the video, I discovered another intact vintage tread on eBay. So I thought, well, I have these extra set of treads. I'll keep them in case a Thunder tank ever comes my way, because they're always missing their treads. And sure enough, one came into my possession. So the nice thing about the way this individual designs these treads, they are the correct rubber. And he makes them slightly oversized so that you don't have to disassemble any of these wheels to get them to go around. So let's just add them onto the tank. When I say slightly oversized, I don't mean by much. I mean just enough that you don't have to worry about taking these wheels off. As you can see, they still fit very snugly onto the tank, and they look great. All right, so that's one. See, there's no extra movement. It works really well. Yeah, this particular Thunder Tank behaves a lot better than mine. So I'm gonna have to look into that after I get done with this video and see what's wrong with the one I've got. All right. Look at that. Nice, vintage, fully repaired, with all of its parts, Thunder Tank. And check it out, it actually works. Works correctly, goes all the way back down. I could not be happier with this repair, especially not knowing what I was getting into and not really sure what happened. But like I said at the beginning of this, sometimes when you're not really sure why a toy is malfunctioning, it could be like a car engine situation where the only solution after troubleshooting it is to just, you know, disassemble the engine and rebuild it, because you know you're rebuilding it the right way. So this has been very fulfilling, and I can't wait to see this go to a good owner. This is going to be one of the rare times where I might actually put something like this on the RetroBlasting eBay and see how it does, because it's not a childhood donation. It's not one of mine from when I was a kid. This hasn't been owned by anybody. This was just something that came with a very badly damaged Thundercat lair. So I might actually consider selling this at some point, because it is a really nice piece. It's not perfect. It's played with, but it is a really nice piece, and I might sell it just to help it find a good home. So thanks for watching this, everyone, and we will see you on the next video.